Hello, Dr. Ambrosch. Welcome to our show. I'm a big fan of your pieces for Merriam West. You are an academic, but I like
Thank
your
you.
English. You speak English well. So, Dr. Ambrosch, please tell us a little about yourself.
Well, as you've already said, I'm a writer in that I write pieces on topical issues, political issues, even economics. But my educational background is in literary and cultural studies. So I have a PhD from the University of Graz in Austria. Right. So this is we're talking across a huge ocean and a lot of geography. But I guess with my background there, also there is another element to it. I've always been involved in music to a large extent, and the music scene I've been involved in has been very far left in its political leanings. And so my original, combine in combination with the humanities, which are known to be like on the left side of things, and that background, I grew up pretty far left. I'd even say radical far left. And in recent years, I've changed my point of view quite a bit. So I'd consider myself centrist. I have like libertarian conservative leanings here and there, depending on the issue. So I guess that would be a background.
Well, Gerfried, I'm really impressed by your writings, as you should know by
Thank you.
now. And you wrote a piece for
Likewise.
Marian West
Mhm.
titled Navigating Whiteness Between White Shaming and White Indigenous Rights. And this is how you start. White shaming is a political tactic aimed at invalidating the opinions and experiences of people of European descent. Premised on a belief in collective guilt, it judges white folks not by the content of their character, but by the color of their skin. No, Western civilization is a predominantly white civilization. It's also tolerant and individualistic. Western writers are fond of exploring other cultures. I've read many white men who are experts in African history and Asian history. However, unfortunately, in recent years, white men in particular have been shamed for expressing white culture. So, for example, black men can refer to themselves as black kings, but one cannot wear a shirt saying it's okay to be white when the person who wears a shirt saying it's okay to be white is only responding to anti-white racism. What is the root of this new situation, Gerfried?
Well, it's certainly a double standard. Just if you look at it on a level playing field, you'd be surprised to see like one group being able to express these sentiments, whereas another group, for no apparent reason, is not allowed to express those sentiments. I should say that I find, just as a a short preface here. Identitarianism somewhat off-putting. So I never really thought of myself as being white until it started being held against me in many respects. And better than anyone over in the United States that it's not exactly a term of endearment to call somebody a white man. It's not a descriptive term even. It's a term of abuse almost, and that has slowly crept into European culture as well, which is particularly strange because obviously Europe is on many levels a white culture, just in terms of the people who've always lived here. Right, so that's just a statement of fact, but there's this double standard, and I've come across it in academia early on in my career when I was still a student, undergraduate student actually. I remember in what was it, a cultural studies class, American cultural studies, we were given an excerpt of Dinesh D'Souza's The End of Racism, I believe it was. And the task we were given was to find the racism in it, right? And I'm talking about the late 90s here. This is not recently, right? This is not a recent occurrence. And I remember also late 90s taking a class on whiteness. that was just there in the curriculum in Austria, and that has definitely has its roots in American culture and sort of the conflicts over there, but they're here now. So these conflicts are here now, and they're being expressed in terms that sound strange to anyone who believes in equality in the sense of equal treatment, non-discrimination, these kinds of things.
What's interesting is that the brilliant Paul Gottfried, I'm a big fan of Paul Gottfried. I think he's the smartest man on the right. His thesis is that we're experiencing a cultural war among whites. So, for example, whites who defend Western civilizations are being attacked by liberal whites who want to uproot the foundations of the West, and minorities are being used as a tool to achieve their nefarious ends. And I agree with him, because when you assess cultural politics seriously, it is anti-religion, anti-capitalism, anti-individualism. So, for example, the Smithsonian argue that individualism is white. Western culture is uniquely individualistic, but Western culture is dynamic and tolerant and accepting of other cultures. So if you're going to argue that delayed gratification, hard work, individualism, and the nuclear family are predominantly white and should only be expressed by white people, and if you espouse such views, you are racist, then this is an implicit attack on Western culture that's predominantly white. So it's not really about black people fighting Asian people or white people, but evil white people, as Paul would call them, attacking their more conservative counterparts. And I think it's just unfortunate that Asians, Hispanics, and blacks are being used.
Very much so, and it's also patronizing and condescending towards them. So just the whole idea that an open liberal society of the kind, and I'm using, when I say liberal, I use it in the European classical sense, just to avoid confusion here. As you said, it's a tolerant society, it's an open society, and that means people are invited to join in, right? And to join in means taking up those values, taking up those behaviors, and learning the skills and so forth that made this civilization great. So I think it's quite condescending and patronizing to say that people of non-European descent cannot do that, and it should only be white people. And if they do insist on it, they're being racist. So that's absolutely, that's just a non sequitur, and it just doesn't make any sense to me.
Yes,
So I think that's the crux of it, really.
yeah, I agree with you, Gerfried, but liberals are also latently admitting that Western culture is unique. I don't believe that they get that point. But when you say that Western culture is individualistic and only
Mhm.
white people can be individualistic, you're being racist. But there's also a latent acceptance that the West is unique.
That is true as well. That is true as well. So it's I think really what it comes down to on, I would almost say on the psychological level, is a lack of with the current generation, at least, a lack of gratitude, almost a lack of understanding of what it took to create a culture like that, and what makes it unique, and why it's working so well, why the buses run on time, why there's institutions that, broadly speaking, work very well. And there's a safety net, there's infrastructure, all these kinds of things, and those things are lacking. But people today compare, and especially on the left and the far left, and I was like that too, tend to compare the current status quo with their utopian vision of what life could be, but not with like actual sort of other cultures, right? And I think that's where it comes from. It's just a lack of knowledge almost, and of understanding as to the uniqueness of it all.
Yes, the movement to abolish slavery emerged in the West, and the British expended significant resources to topple the slave trade. So slavery is a blight on Western history, because only in the West did freedom become a salient value. So these are
It's almost, yeah,
important
it's almost
topics to ponder.
Exactly. Yeah, and it's almost like admitting to a mistake as slavery surely was. I mean, there's no one's arguing that slavery was a good cause, right? No one's arguing that, or that's even forgivable to a certain extent. However, as you say, um, the very fact that Europeans, especially the British, I think they were leading the way there, owned up to it and said, "Well, this has got to stop. This is cruel and this is just immoral." And then even went to such lengths as to use their power to make others stop as well, other nations stop as well. So I think that's very often forgotten, and it's a very important part of the history of slavery. There's a reason there's not that much slavery anymore, at least not in those parts of the world that are being, for lack of better word, controlled by the West.
And slavery is still a problem in Africa and the Middle East. And it's brutal, but people seem to be more interested in rehashing past atrocities instead of solving the present problem of slavery in the 21st century. Because if you do so, you're going to shame non-whites, and the goal is to embarrass white people.
Yes, and that's, I mean, it's almost a cliche to say, but white liberals can never do that, right? They can never. That would just be a breach of their morality. And now I'm using liberal in the American sense, sort of like progressive
Yeah,
whites. Can never.
British liberalism and American liberalism are different. When Americans invoke the term liberal, they're saying you want to use the force of government to achieve your objectives.
Exactly, and in the European and British meaning, it's precisely the opposite, actually,
Yeah,
right? It's sort
it's
of.
I call American conservatives libertarians with Christian views, because when you listen to conservative, they're really
Mhm.
classical liberals. They want low taxes and limited government, but they're conservative on social issues. So
Right.
British liberalism is similar to popular American conservatism to an extent.
You could say that, yes.
Yeah,
There's an overlap there for sure.
yes. But
But yeah, as,
people,
as I was saying, sorry,
yes, you may continue. You may continue.
as I was saying, there seems to be a reluctance, as you pointed out, the reluctance among white liberals and progressives to just not blame white people for whatever evil there is in the world. It always comes down to whiteness, which in itself is quite a strange way of they use this phrase of centering whiteness and decentering whiteness, and what they're doing is centering whiteness, because everything revolves around whiteness in their view of the world, right? The failures of people in Africa or Asia or whatever part of the world, it all comes down to white people. So it's they like to make it about them, which is very strange to me.
It's laughable. So, for example, Robin DiAngelo argues that white people are innately racist. Many of them do not know that they're racist, yet she expects white people who are unaware of their racism to solve the problem of racism. In other words, black people can have no agency.
The denial of agency, for sure, is a huge problem there, and it just really it holds people back, is what it does. It just
Yes, so
holds them.
yes, I agree. I agree 100% because I read an article in the New York Times recently, and a trainer said that punctuality is a white trait. That's a white concept.
Right.
So if you teach
Mm.
young people that punctuality is for white people, they may never get a proper job.
Yes, I
Standards
mean
are being
that's
lowered to appease black students, and as a result, blacks will be unproductive and inefficient in America for a very long time.
the bigotry of low
Yes,
expectations. I think
uh,
that's the phrase, isn't it?
yes, Oregon teaching that mathematics is racist will not help black students. It will make them worse off relative to Asian students and white
No, but
students.
it's more about, and I think Thomas Sowell really hits the nail on the head in White Liberals and Black Rednecks, as well
Brilliant
as
book.
in yeah, brilliant book, as well as in Division of the Anointed, books like that, where he just points out, a lot of it. It's not about making progress, or it's not about helping people, get a foothold in society and advance and things like that. It's about patting yourself on the shoulder and sort of you know feeling virtuous
Yeah.
for having the right opinions, but they're never tested. Those opinions are not tested, and in cases where they're implemented, affirmative action and things like that, and they are being put to the test, the negative results are obvious, right? And then, but those are denied, and it's really strange to me.
Yeah. So, for example, I've seen studies published by major universities like Cornell saying that diversity efforts are often disappointing. So the evidence and research do not support these assertions, but they persist to the detriment of minorities.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
But
Crime as well. Like, if you just ignore the fact that there's pockets of criminality in certain segments of society, and just pretend that you know everyone's equally suspicious or equally likely to commit a certain type of crime, you're not going to solve the crimes. You're not going to solve the problem.
yes, Gerfried, one has to engage in discrimination. Judgment is very important. We discriminate all the time. So, for example, if you're going
Yes.
to date a woman, that's discrimination. If you employ a PhD, you're also discriminating. But, Gerfried, please
Mhm.
explain to us your concept of white indigenous rights.
Now, I wouldn't claim that is my concept at all. I just use the phrase um, to create sort of, or to illustrate a counterpoint to the current culture of white shaming, right? So I think that the title of the article you're referring to is between white indigenous rights and white shaming, or the other way around. Um, so I thought that was a good way to illustrate it. And really, hearing that term, usually it evokes, a sense of, white, like ethno nationalism, things like that, right? Segregation. Um, not necessarily. What I'm referring to is just that the mere fact, and that's being ignored, that European society, right, for time immemorial, has always been a white society. Just that's just a statement of fact, and that does not deny sort of like open. I was almost going to say open borders, but I'm not for open borders. But sort of like a more inviting culture. It doesn't have to do with identity politics. It doesn't have to anything to do with segregationism. It's just a mere statement of fact that the indigenous people of Europe just happen to be white. And that fact in itself, I think, carries some implication, has some implications in terms of the uniqueness of the culture that was created by these people, and how in no way does it exclude anyone from also participating in that culture. It's just, as I said, is a statement of fact. It's how Europe has developed.
And your opinion, Gerfried, is not racist. The United Nations is an institution with documents on cultural rights. Native Americans are well respected, and Canada is in a push to decolonize the curriculum. Therefore, white people should be in a position to claim cultural rights. It's just common sense. If you're going to argue that
Yes, I mean, if you
minorities
want to,
can have cultural rights, do the same for whites.
yeah, I mean, if you want to decolonize, right, and you just, I mean, this is just testing the hypothesis of decolonization. Well, you want to decolonize Europe? Let's get rid of the Latin alphabet, right? Which was brought to Western Europe by the Romans. There's a reason, and it has to do with the Romans, as you probably know, why Western Europe was more advanced. It's always been more advanced than Eastern Europe, and so forth, right? So you could, go. It's really arbitrary where we draw the line. Know what I mean? It's just, you know, uh, I don't know how to
It's silly. Why I
yeah,
Gerfried,
it's silly. It's absurd.
yeah, Gerfried, you're a smart man, but whenever I'm in a personal conversation that's not been taped, discussing identity politics is really annoying because it's nonsense. It's
Yes,
really
yes.
dubious and
And
silly.
yet,
But back to the issue of decolonization.
yes,
Westerners are very tolerant. Roland Oliver, Jan Vasina, many white men write on Africa and Asia, Ross Tyrrell, etc. Therefore, there isn't a need to decolonize the curriculum because it's already diverse. But by decolonizing the curriculum, they're actually saying to us, get rid of Western philosophy. So you cannot teach Confucius and Immanuel Kant. You just need to teach Confucius. And that's why I object to decolonization. It
it's
doesn't make
almost,
sense.
yeah, it's almost too stupid to even contemplate, because you know, like every strand of philosophy has its roots here and there, and literature is, it's always an amalgamation of different things, and every culture is. If you start talking about decolonization and cultural appropriation, things like that, it's just really what it comes down to is, well, it's just not possible. Even if you're just trying to trying the impossible, and ruining everything in the process, right? Academia doesn't need decolonization, or it doesn't need decolonizing. It just needs to do what it's done for centuries. It needs to produce knowledge, right? And it doesn't matter where the knowledge comes from, really.
But some would argue that Westerners are suffering from pathological altruism. So one does not need to directly approve the foundation of the West because Westerners are more likely to trust foreign people. The social capital is quite high in the West, in part in places like Scandinavia and Sweden, etc. And was once very,
Hmm.
very high in England. So if you're a foreigner, you don't need to destroy the West. Westerners are accommodating. It's not a perfect society, but compared to the Middle East, Asia, and some parts of Africa, it's less ethnocentric and less racist. Western supremacy
Sure.
is a concept I like. If the Western world was in the doldrums, people wouldn't migrate to New Zealand, America, and Canada and Germany. Singapore is very wealthy, but
Yes.
it's a strict country, so we tend to prefer the liberalism of the UK and America to the authoritarianism of Singapore. So it's Western supremacy. If the West is so bad, why are immigrants coming to the West? So why don't they stay in Africa or some poor Asian country? I cannot fathom this at all.
Yes. I mean, there's, as I said, there's a reason the West is the West, and why it's attractive to people from all over the world. It's a unique culture, as you say, and it's always been very inviting, very open. But to pretend, as you say, that it's just one culture of many, and there's no difference, and another culture is just as good. Well, if that were the case, why would there even be migration? Why would there be immigration? Why would we even talk about mass immigration? It's not. Of course, there's wars and things like that, and there's refugees, which is a different issue, right? That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is there is definitely what they call pull factors, and Europe has a lot of them. That's why people come. Um, I think the people you refer to as white liberals, they do a pretty good job of destroying Western institutions from the inside. I don't necessarily see the immigrant as a threat, right? That's not the threat. The threat is that when they come here, they find weak institutions, and I think that is the problem. There's the refusal or reluctance to affirm Western supremacy when it is clear that Western culture is, better in certain respects, certainly in respects people care about, than many other cultures.
Yeah. And based on the nature of our conversation, immigration is problematic. Immigration is correlated with economic growth and innovation. I'm a libertarian, so I am pro-immigration, but in the context of multiculturalism, it doesn't make much sense. As you rightly state in your article, diversity is often seen as an impediment to development according to actual data. Uday Gaylor, for example, is a bit of an expert
Hmm.
in this field. Cultural diversity is important. Diversity in terms of ideas is very important. But if people cannot unite around central goals, that's a problem. This is one of the reasons why Africa is poor relative to the rest of the world. Scholars call it ethno-linguistic fragmentation. It's very diverse. So you're encouraging people to migrate to America, the UK, Germany, and at the same time you're saying embrace your otherness, and that is very problematic. So how do
Yes.
we reconcile diversity with Western culture and decline in the context of
Yes.
immigration?
Well, exactly. I think there's no greater hindrance to development and progress than isolation. And isolation doesn't necessarily mean, you're a tribe on a secluded island somewhere. It can also mean, self-isolation within the greater society, within society, where groups form parallel societies, and they're self-isolating. They're sticking to their own, mores and cultural habits and things like that. Uh, Essentially missing the boat, right? There's that's society just, Western society just doesn't work according to their principles. It works to European Western principles, and if you just ignore those and don't try to assimilate, that's too bad, right? And then so you have that side of the thing, and you also have the other side where there's, you know now growing, I would say, proportion of or growing portion of the population, especially sort of the so-called, if you want to call them that, but so-called elites, um, that just see any affirmation of Western supremacy as a form of racism and xenophobia and all of that. So you know these immigrants, they don't stand a chance, really.
Yes, and what is also fascinating is that since the 1990s, polls have been showing that African Americans oppose immigration,
Hmm.
even legal immigration. So African Americans, according to Pew, are invested in their race. Latin America has a problem known as colorism. Racism is still a big issue in Latin America. And after migrating, many people from that part of the world identify as white in America. And for a long time, Mexican Americans insisted that they were white. So when you import immigrants, you can induce tension because Hispanics and blacks are not necessarily the best of friends. And this is an issue that many on the left do not want to admit.
Yes.
I've read articles informing me that gangs in LA have literally firebombed black houses, not because the members were gangsters, but because they want to get rid of blacks. It's a form of ethnic cleansing. So Hispanics and blacks have issues. Blacks and Asians have issues because for whatever reason, blacks assume that Asian entrepreneurs are holding them back, or they're alienated young men, and alienated young men tend to create more crime. So immigration is really a mishmash of problems.
It certainly is, and I would say this the most obvious solution to it is controlled slow immigration. Like you, I'm not against immigration, not at all. I think it's an important part of like a modern society. But if you don't have your check and balances in place, you're gonna get these problems that you were just describing. You're gonna have those problems, and it's almost the case you just described. It's almost like white people are not the only people who can be racist, right? I mean, this is that in itself is something that you know it's almost risque to to state, right? That there is like racism is not it's not a white thing. Actually, as I point out in the article, I think at some point modern Western societies, which are you know it's almost like the wider the society. I mean, this is just to describe it, right? The wider the society, modern Western societies, they're the least racist societies that have ever existed, the most
Yes.
tolerant, and so on, most individualistic, and all of these things, they don't exist, or at least not to the same extent, in countries where a lot of these people, come from. So of course there's going to be tensions. Of course there's going to be problems. If they're competing for the same jobs, that's going to create problems, especially among like low income segments of society. That's going to they have enough competition as it is, and so all of these things, they as I say, is a mishmash of problems that that comes with it.
And I also believe that liberals are generating racism. And let me explain the issue to you quite clearly.
Hmm.
I was familiar with Richard Lane and Arthur Jensen for a long time. I'm not saying that these men are racist, but for years I was familiar with race research, but I didn't take it
Hmm.
seriously until liberals started to parrot the myth of systemic racism. Therefore, when you
Right.
delve deeply into biology, one will recognize that race is not it's not clear cut, and it's a bit silly to say that it is a social construct. There are well known racial differences in intelligence, IQ, and self control. And because research and data are both growing, people are yearning for more knowledge, and many of us are recognizing that race is a salient construct. So some are no longer colorblind. So because white liberals are so hostile, white men in particularly who are studious are becoming less liberal. So anti-whiteness has created a serious backlash. So a couple of years ago, I had little interest in white nationalism, but after reviewing the data seriously, I said tribalism is innate. Humans are innately tribal. We self-segregate. Even in college, black students are likely to speak to black students. Students tend to segregate in college, especially if it is very diverse. So taking these factors into consideration, I don't oppose white nationalism. I only oppose white nationalism when it is counter to assimilation. I
Yes.
would, yeah, I'm not an identitarian, but I understand the plight of white nationalists quite clearly. Do you have any particular view on white nationalism?
Well, if I mean, just to restate where I am sitting right now, I'm in Vienna. I'm a mere, I don't know, it's like a 20-minute bike ride to Hitler's old flat. Right. So historically, a term like white nationalism here in this context has very clear connotations, and you would just not use it. You would not hear
Yes,
it,
yes, yes.
and so on. Not even the word race, right? Like the word race, since World War II, has been used almost exclusively to describe different breeds of dogs or cats. So it's like not humans. So we're talking about a very different vocabulary here, right? Linguistically, we're very far apart, and even so, when terms get like white nationalism get translated back into this context right here, of course they're gonna that there's a lot of controversy that comes with it. But if you mean by it that you insist on maintaining a nation state that was created by white people and that is culturally white, if you will, and you just insist on people coming in, no matter what they look like, assimilating. If you mean that, there's I don't see anything wrong with it. But as I said, it's a very difficult task to really sort of like compare like the nuances geographically and culturally, if we're talking about things like that in the context of European societies and the United States, for instance.
Yes, that's my only objection to some white nationalists. Quite a number of them are racist, and some who say that they're not
Mhm.
racist are against assimilation. But I I'm not in favor of a white ethno state, but white nationalism has some merit, especially in the present context. If whites come under attack, we shouldn't expect them to sit down and take it. That's just logical. People will react.
Yes.
Yeah,
As you pointed out, that the backlash has been long coming, and the backlash is here. People are not going to take it lying down, and the more ridiculous the claims become, maths being racist, whatever sort of, being punctual is racist, and these absurdities, right? People are, just shaking their heads. And luckily, I talk to, not just academics and people like that, but I talk to normal people on a regular basis. And if they, there's people lucky enough, that they've never even heard the word woke, for
good,
instance,
good
right?
for them.
Yes, there's people who just shake their heads in disbelief when I tell them about some of the concepts that are being pushed by these people. So really, what we're seeing here is sort of weird understanding of multiculturalism, often at the expense of reason and integration, assimilation, and things like that. So there's unique problems.
But what's really funny, Gerfried, is that
Hmm.
blacks and other minority groups can have separate graduation. So we accept segregation. Blacks and Hispanics and Asians can
Yes.
segregate. They're culturally woke, but whites cannot express their culture at all. And it is
No, I
not.
mean,
I'm not particularly interested in race. I don't find it frustrating. But if you're a white person, that must be very disturbing. And the stories become
yes,
more and
yes.
more ridiculous.
No, of course, because I think something I saw on Twitter yesterday, um, where a short clip of, I guess, I think it was some sort of like talk show or something, an obese black lady blaming her obesity on white supremacy, because diets don't work for her because she has such high stress levels due to living in a racist society. It's like, I didn't feed you those donuts. That wasn't me. It's like, there's this idea of like collective guilt, and just blame Whitey. And that's just like, as I said, even here now, old white man is one of the worst things you can be called, right? But it's especially strange because that applies to almost half of the population, right? Not counting women, and like old is everyone, I guess, over 30 these days. I don't know. Everyone's just like not Gen Z, but it's really ridiculous. And normal, regular people, ordinary, like working class people, they just shake their heads in disbelief, and just can't believe it.
And this is why in one of my pieces for Taki Mag, I argue for defining whiteness as a culture of progress. So for example,
Yes.
individualism is unique to the West. Celebrate individualism, celebrate the concept of freedom, celebrate parliamentary democracy, the Roman Catholic Church, etc. So white nationalists, if they choose, should transcend tribal identities. But as one said to me recently, he's tribal. But if they were to transcend tribal identities and redefine whiteness as a culture of progress, I do believe that the political program would be more effective.
Yes. And here's the thing I wanted to say earlier. Just came back to me now. Uh, of course. Whoever said people weren't tribal, right? Of course, people are tribal. That's how could they not be? And it's showing. It's like, the whole woke movement is highly tribal, right? It's all about different tribes fighting wars. But the West, with its institutions of democracy and Roman law and all these kinds of things, these are the checks and balances, right? that prevent tribalism from getting the better of us. These are the mechanisms. The individualism that you mentioned, that's anti-tribal, right? This is it doesn't matter, like your tribe is not as important as you are as an individual, as a person. And that really is, I mean, I don't know, like I guess people on the left would find that naive to some extent, but I think that that's where the solution is, and that's why it's so important to maintain, to uphold Western values.
Yes, and you made an important point pertaining to tribalism. If you're individualistic, then your propensity for corruption is lower. This has been confirmed by many studies. Individualistic people have a more universalistic view on life. So you're not going to support a policy because it benefits your kin group if it's objectively wrong. So you're actually right. Western culture
Yes.
does in fact impose a check and balance on dubious traits or political corruption. You're actually right. But what I also find interesting, Gerfried,
Hmm.
is that the intellectual dark web was once very
Yes.
popular. I don't believe the movement is popular anymore, but some individuals in the movement are very, very popular. And
Yeah.
their ideas are not bad, but it's just that I get a form of weakness from them. I don't think that they're passionate about defending the West. It seems to be a clickbait culture. So one person would go on Twitter and he gets 10,000 likes or
Right.
4,000 retweets, but there isn't deep analysis. They shy away from defending Western culture and Christianity, and they don't believe in the salience of race. Racial differences are real, and such differences can create implications. So, for example, in your piece for
Hmm.
Merriam West, you quoted Sam Harris, who
Hmm.
parroted that popular claim. There are more examples of variation within a group than across groups, but that doesn't negate the primacy of race. One must look at specific genes and their consequences. And Sam is a bright man. I'm sure he's familiar with A.F.W. Edwards, or maybe at some point you read him. But race is a very complicated issue, and it's silly to downplay the significance of race in terms of its,
And I
its
think
biological consequences.
he knows that, and I think he's, as I said, he's quite aware of it. He had Charles Murray on his
Yes,
podcast a couple of years ago, and that got him into a lot of trouble. You know, with because his I guess his fan base is sort of like left leaning.
yeah,
Got him in a lot of trouble, but he doesn't shy away from it. But I think what the IDW has been doing is it has served as a kind of like gateway for people to get into more to engage more deeply with some of the underlying issues. At the same time, it's true, as you say, that they put race very low on the agenda,
yes,
um, trying to sort of maintain and or well, not maintain, but um, champion certain Western what we recognize as Western
yes.
values,
Eh,
right? So
they like to talk about Western values without explaining their origins and uniqueness to the West. So, for example,
yes.
someone on the IDW won't mention Ricardo Duchesne or
Hmm.
Kevin MacDonald, who both men have written interesting books on the West, because Ricardo and Kevin are pariahs in the academic world. So for me personally, I think the
Yes.
IDW, no, it's a business.
Yes, to a certain extent, and but as you said earlier, I think it's not really a thing anymore, is it?
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think
no, no, not really. It's a
Sam,
clickbait movement. They get information that the school is teaching students that black communism should be celebrated, and then they post it on Twitter.
yes, that's true. It's very they tend to be like someone like Peterson, for instance, tends to be very quotable,
Yes,
and and that works. I think he's done Peterson in particular. I know you've criticized him before, and and you're right to a certain extent. I think the claim that he is some kind of guru is certainly right. I mean, that's just, you just need to look at the following and that he has, and you just need to look at some of the issues he's talking about and the way he's talking about them. However, I think just media events like his interview with what was her name, Katie Newman,
Yeah, that young
right?
lady. Yes.
The famous one, which now has close to like 20 million views, right? Something crazy, ridiculous, 20 million views or something like that. A lot of people saw that, and for a lot of people, that was the first time hearing about, well, maybe there are other reasons behind the gender pay gap than discrimination
Of
against
course.
women, sexism. So there's always a place for people like that. But of course, when it comes to different issues, he doesn't touch him, and maybe he's wise not to. I don't know. Like maybe it's not a stupid move to do
No,
so.
it's a financially wise move. So, for example, we're talking
Probably,
about
yes.
the gender pay gap. On average,
Yes.
men work longer hours. They're employed in
And
more
yeah.
lucrative jobs and more dangerous jobs. And these assertions have been corroborated by Harvard University and the Bureau of Labor and Statistics. Men on average work for longer hours, and they're more likely to die
Yes.
on the job. Therefore, men must be compensated. So discrimination is actually a minor issue. And the
Yeah.
recent study said that the gender pay gap is receding in favor of women. The wages of women are rising according to Pew. So Jordan Peterson is a smart man and is adept at educating ordinary people, but Peterson is not going to write a scholarly book defending patriarchy.
No, no, it's
A-
probably not gonna.
and patriarchy makes perfect sense, as you should know. I put patriarchy under two categories: equitable patriarchy and inequitable
Hmm.
patriarchy. We're living in the age of equitable patriarchy. Women are viewed as autonomous, they have rights, but the legal system is still in their favor. So, for example, during the age of the refugee crisis, Canada expressed preference for women and children, and people
Yes.
view research depicting women in a positive light as more favorable. So society is interested in women. Women can give birth, so evolution will favor women. Men, on the other and are more competitive, they take risk, they have to produce, and women as a result prefer competitive men who can deliver for them for them and their children. So equitable patriarchy makes sense, and in societies that are not patriarchal, there tends to be weak institutions. So one can make a strong argument for patriarchy, but that's not possible on the dark web.
No, they what they will say is that Western society is not a patriarchy. So that's they just throw that out of the window right from the start.
Yes, so
Um,
marriage is responsible for civilizing men. Married men take more risk, they're motivated to earn more. And for most men, especially low income men, when they're not in a serious relationship, they tend to lack purpose. So
yes, I
men
mean
are important.
all of these things. Um, I know to be true, and I believe Peterson has mentioned most of these things, especially the he has been criticized very heavily for this concept of enforced monogamy a couple of
But,
years ago,
but that's a
where
scientific concept.
yeah, where he describes, he just basically just quoted someone. It wasn't even like his idea, right? But I think he touches on things like that. But we know these things to be true because there's evidence for it. Um, but you must not forget that we still live in a society where truth for most people is whatever they hear, presented in their echo chambers, on social media or whatever program they watch. And the mainstream view these days, of course, is that there's basically no difference between men and women in their preferences, in their um, abilities, and so forth. Uh, but science knows that on average there's a lot of difference.
Several. There are even gender differences in crying.
In crime,
In crying.
crying. Okay,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah. I mean,
there are several.
for sure, and I think like anyone who's ever been in a heterosexual relationship knows, knows that men and women are not the same, not by a long shot. So these things are just out there. They're real, and denying them just doesn't help anyone.
Yes,
However, we live in a society where that is expected of us, right? It is expected of us to just deny the obvious, and that's sort of where it gets into almost totalitarian territory, where truth is whatever we say is true, and that's just that just cannot be a good path to go down.
yes. So, before we digress, I must say that, as you do know, women are more empathetic than men. They're also more sociable. So these traits work wonders in the family. The family is built on sentiment and love. I don't object to women working, but they have a comparative advantage in the family, and they can turn it into a competitive advantage. So, for example, children whose female parents stay at home tend to do better in school.
No, and I mean, even though it's anecdotal, I can
It's it,
attest to that. Like
it's
my
not, and
my
there are
my, my
studies.
mom. Yeah, I mean, what I'm saying is, like, I can attest to that from my own experience, because I grew up with stay-at-home mom, and like after school she would sit down with us, and sort of make sure we'll do our homework, make sure we're not up to anything stupid, and would test us you know on our progress in school, and things like that. So I mean,
Yes, that's
it's
that experience. That's my
clear, it's
experience too.
obvious.
That's my experience too. Because women are different from men. When they give birth, the tendency to nurture grows. Men on the other hand become more strategic. So men guide children. They tell them what to do and how to do it. But women provide support even in adulthood. A man is always a baby to his mom, even when he's 70.
Yes.
Yeah, so these are really, really serious
I
issues,
went to I
Gerfried.
went to see I went to see my folks a couple days ago, and I approve of that estimate assessment. But the thing is, these are just so obvious truths, and you can see them even in other species, and yet it has become virtuous and fashionable, or it's being considered, it's considered progressive to deny these truths.
Yeah,
And as long as that's the case, I think there's not going to be um, much progress on the issue.
yeah.
So
Political correctness, as one writer argues, will increase social status. So we tend to echo the views of the elite to boost social respectability. Robert Anderson, he writes for Quillette. I think our
mhm.
listeners should check him out. Have you ever read Rob?
Probably if he writes for Cadet, yes.
Yes, yeah. Rob is very
Most
big
likely.
on luxury views and cancel culture. What
Hmm.
very young.
That's the phrase he used.
Yeah,
Luxury belief
luxury views. Yes, yeah.
of views or beliefs. Yeah.
Yeah, when he graduates and gets his PhD and makes some more money, then he can become truly radical. I know him personally.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, you
but
do.
yeah,
Okay.
now that
Fantastic.
he's a PhD student, he has to be polite. But the moment he gets the PhD and gets a good job and starts to make his millions, I want him to become a radical. Yeah, Rob
He can
is,
afford it.
yes, he can afford it. So, for
He can
example,
afford it. Yes.
I I live in a foreign country. I work. I like to write. Sometimes I'm paid. Sometimes I'm not paid. But recently, I
Wow.
said many of the writers I respect, Gerfried, are very old or they're dead.
Hmm.
So I'm not one to complain. So I said, I know to solve the problem. I'm going to start a podcast. It's not professional or very established, but I can interview interesting people. And I do believe that to an extent I am interesting. So this is why you're on the
Yes,
show. This type of discussion, we
I'm a
will
big
not
fan
get
of
it.
your writing.
Yeah, we will not get
So
this
yes.
type of discussion anywhere else. Like Quillette is a good publication, but not even Quillette will take these strong stances.
Well, yeah, it's difficult. I think they're more focused. It seems to me on the gender issue.
Yes,
I think that's just the denial of biological sex. I think that's one of the big issues they've tackled in many pieces. Race, not so much, but there's been good pieces out.
yeah,
There's
yes.
Samuel Cronin, I think.
Yes, he's a very,
Pronounced.
very interesting writer.
He is a very good writer, and he has interesting views on race and so forth.
But
Um,
Samuel Cronin, Gerfried, Samuel Cronin is a really great writer. I admire his work, but he's not
mhm.
black. Had Samuel Cronin been black, he would have been a celebrity.
That is true.
Yeah,
That
we,
is
we had
very.
this discussion recently. So
Yeah,
Cole,
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
That's.
yeah. Coleman uses an interesting writer with
Mhm.
somewhat fascinating views, but he's a young black guy, and
Yes,
Samuel Cronin is
very,
not.
very young,
Yes,
very young.
yeah, he's 25. Yeah, Samuel Cronin
Yes.
is not a young black guy.
I don't know how old he is, but he's definitely not a black guy. So,
Yeah. So,
um,
be,
of course, I mean that's and you mentioned in was it in an email, I think, a while ago, that there's even, especially among conservatives these days, there's tendency to favor minority writers over
yes,
non-minority writers, because they're to the other side, at least, or I guess that's the rationale behind it. To the other side, they such a writer just seems more authentic, or seems more uh, credible, because he's it's almost like they criticize the idea of lived experience that we keep hearing about,
yes,
on the one hand, but then kind of use that same logic in how they pick sort of their favorites.
yeah. Conservatives, as Paul Gottfried likes to remind us, pander. They pander a lot. So, for
Mm,
example, Paul is someone I respect immensely. He's brilliant, but
yes, yes.
Paul was purged by the right years ago. So there are many well-read people who don't know much about Paul. They read National Review, but Paul is rarely mentioned. But if you're serious
Mm,
about conservatism and political philosophy, Paul is someone you must read. You must read Paul Gottfried. He's
yes.
very deep, and I don't give away respect easily, but Paul is really deep. But back
No,
to
and I have to admit, I had never heard of him until you mentioned him to me.
and you're a
So
well-read person. It's the effect of the right-wing purge.
yeah, that might be the case. I don't necessarily know the exact biographical details there, and the historical details, like why that happened, and I guess from what I gather, he's done some, or has had some dubious collaborations, maybe here and there, with people. Richard Spencer,
He's
you
not a big fan
mentioned.
of Richard, though. He's not a big fan of Richard.
No, no. Spencer, like it just strikes me as a. I mean, he's shown himself to be a bully, which I think it's not, it's just not interesting to me at all. But I guess Gottfried he has worked with him on some
Yes,
things,
yes, yes. He has
like
collaborated with him.
yes, in the past. So it's maybe that's part of the reason. I don't know, but what I have read, like, by him, off him, you know articles at this point, struck me as a very he struck me as a very deep thinker, and so
Yes,
I'm really looking forward to reading more.
yeah. But Gerfried, you also wrote an excellent piece on Black Lives Matter for Marian West. And you
Well,
are,
a very recent one, yes.
yes, you are mesmerized that BLM has been doing so well in Europe. What's behind the success of BLM in Europe?
That's a curious one, isn't it? Because it's such an American phenomenon.
Yes.
But what I describe in the piece is it starts with a short description of the BLM protests in Vienna, just the days after the George Floyd thing, the killing of George Floyd happened, and um, it seems it's incredible, but it was 50,000 strong, right? Like, it drew 50,000 people into the center of Vienna, which is, a huge demonstration. And so what happened was that the slogan, I mean, because nobody disagrees with the sentence, Black
No.
Lives Matter, of course. Um, but you could see how a movement hijacked just the liberal tolerance of people. So the thing is, of course, it was carried out under the mantle of okay, let's have a demonstration against racism. Fair enough. There's a demonstration against racism. It's already a bit weird that you have a demonstration like that over a case that happened in the United States, right? And then because of that connection, it was hijacked by Black Lives Matter. There's there's a chapter here, um, and all the different beliefs that come with it, with Black Lives Matter. It's sort of like their Marxist background, their like
Anti-Christian and anti-men.
anti-family stance and all that, sort of like far left progressive stances. They were smuggled in. So, and sure enough, you had like politicians. I mentioned this Dr. Ngoso, who is of African descent, and she is a politician here, a local politician, and she just repeated almost verbatim some of the arguments that you'd hear overseas, pushing for affirmative action, for quotas, an immigrant quota in public offices, managerial jobs, and things like that. So it's really strange how it's woke globalism is what it is, right? So you just days after the event in the United States, you have a similar discussion here, and it was really strange. It has been. It's still going on. Still, people are still out there. Like every demonstration, even climate demonstrations, right? You will see Black Lives Matter banners. So it's quite strange.
But Gerfried, as we
Mhm.
both acknowledge, the BLM movement is based on a false premise. Law enforcement is not replete with systemic racism. There's evidence to the controversy if you read Roland Fryer and Lois James and the PINA study, and a study was also published in a
Yeah, I
psychological
mean,
journal. There, there, racism is a problem. You can eliminate racism. You can reduce racism, but you can never eliminate it. But the data do not tell us that law enforcement is replete with systemic racism. Actually,
yeah, there's even evidence. Yeah,
black cops are more likely to shoot in the course of duty, and we could attribute this to greater exposure to violence. There's always a logical reason for actions. Racism is overstated. George
yeah,
Floyd
maybe like
died. You may go
maybe
ahead. Go ahead.
yes, and also the what they call the Ferguson effect,
Yes.
where like it's been shown that white officers are less likely to um, shoot at black men than they are white men and so forth. So there's a lot of examples like that, and I think it's the strange thing is I would imagine as soon as that information gets out, right, and it just takes a second on social media so to get that information out that you were just citing, that systemic racism in the police. I mean, come on, it's just there's no evidence for it. There's every evidence to the contrary. As soon as that gets out, I mean that should completely deflate the movement. But what I've seen is the exact opposite, that by citing these statistics, you are siding with the racists.
Yes, we need
And
moral clarity. Gerfried, we need moral clarity, not objectivity.
yeah, I mean that's just one of the things there. Even I mean it's mainstream sources now, right? Even was it the Washington Post? I think it was that published like all the statistics of like I think
Yeah,
lethal.
unarmed men were killed. Yes, the figure is very small for
I think it's
2019.
for 2019. I
Yes,
think it was if you actually filter it to like where the person shot was black and unarmed, which is the narrative, right?
yeah, they found
That
15 people.
even less, I think
Yeah, it
it
was
was
9 at one point, and then another point it was moved to
yeah,
15.
yeah. Versus if you remove the filter black, it's many more people, right? Which means there's actually many more people of other racial backgrounds that suffered that fate. And unarmed, as if I remember correctly, just means they didn't have their own gun. It doesn't
Yes.
include reaching for the officer's gun. It doesn't include knives, even, I think. So it's a ridiculous claim, and I think it was important that you did this interview with Junge Freiheit, where
Yes.
because that was translated into German, um, because it's not clear. Like most people, even even personally, like in my personal, most people are not aware of the fact. Like they just think that um, blacks are vastly overrepresented in terms of like police shootings and lethal police shootings, and that there's systemic racism, structural racism, whatever you want to call it, in the police. There's racist cops, of course there is. I mean, how could there not be, right? Uh, but it's not systemic. It's not, you know, it's not the narrative that is being pushed. It's even the opposite in many respects, and that makes it. The strange thing is how that just doesn't get through.
Yes, so for example, there's a study online, you can locate it on NCBI's website, informing us that black offenders are less likely to be killed. White offenders are more likely to be killed in terms of the number, and white offenders are also more likely to be in possession of a gun. And furthermore, blacks are 13.4% of the population, yet they account for 55.9% of murder. So when you take these factors into account, the statistics are justified.
No, of course, yes, and that's the problem is that what people do is they only apply a like a single dimension to their analysis. It's never a multivariate analysis that takes into account these things. For instance, propensity for crime. I mean, that's just, of course, if one group is more likely to, you know, get into conflict with the law and sort of come into contact with police, they'll be more likely to get shot. I don't see how that is even surprising to anyone, right?
Mm.
Yet I can speak for myself, saying that until a couple of years ago, that would have been completely surprising to me, because I just bought the narrative, because it was everywhere, and that there was just no reason for me to doubt it. And until I came across the numbers, and it's like, well, if that's really the case, what are these people on about, right? What is going on here? And in the piece, I also give the example. So we have the same narrative here, but in total, only a dozen people were shot in Austria by police since 2008, right? It's over 1,000 per year in the United States, a dozen since 2008 here, and none of them were black. So what are people talking about, right? There's racists, of course. There's racists in the police, of course. There shouldn't be. Um, but it's not systemic. And it's
Yeah,
just like saying that it is systemic, just is another. It's a roadblock to progress again. Because if you say it's systemic, it becomes abstract. It becomes a weird, like mythical kind of thing, almost. Whereas, saying this cop is racist because he did a racist thing or said a racist thing. Okay, let's remove him from the force. Problem solved. But that's not the discussion we're having. The discussion we're having is that all police is bad, and you know
and the recommendations of the BLM movement are so ineffective. So, for example, there are libertarians who would prefer to privatize the police force or create
Mhm.
community police departments, but BLM does not want an authority to monitor offenders. Their goal is to replace that critical authority with social workers, and that doesn't make much sense. Police drawbacks are correlated with higher crime rates, as Roland Fryer informs us. So BLM policies will result in deaths and murders. That's what Heather
Of
McDonald has
course
been
there will.
saying.
I don't know if you know, but maybe you've read it somewhere. But my dad was a cop, so I grew up in a police household, you could say. So I was kind of, I got these stories and that kind of information firsthand. Like I kind of knew what was good. Like he would tell us, what was going on, like in the streets and things like that, and which groups were causing problems and what they were doing about it and so forth. So I guess I have a slightly better understanding from a firsthand, sort of like pers- um, perspective of what police work entails, and people just to think you could just do away with it and replace. um Actually, come to think of it, that's one of the things my dad used to say. You know he used to say, "Yeah, I don't know what they want from us. I think they want to replace us with social workers." He would say that, and like back in the 80s, 90s, whenever that was. So it's an old issue in some sense, but it's gotten this new BLM, um, face, you could say, that makes it even like more attractive to liberals, progressives, and so forth. The facts just don't matter anymore, and
No,
that's really the problem there.
because truth is a relative concept. Many assume that postmodernism is the rejection of truth. No, postmodernists don't reject truth or knowledge. They view it as a relative concept. They deny the existence of metaphysical truths. That's how
Yes.
postmodernism really works.
The thing about postmodernism, even though it's gotten like a bad rap, I think there's to use that overused phrase, but there's a kernel of truth in many, like especially Foucault. Like I read Foucault very early on. I was still a teenager when I first read Foucault. And there's some interesting analyses that they came up with, and but the way it's been applied, and Lindsay and Pluckrose in their book Critical Theories, they
Yes.
used the term applied postmodernism. I think that which was the first step towards what we now call wokeness, which is a combination of Frankfurt School critical theory and these sort of vulgar postmodern theories, right? So that's what we're getting. But I think it's really quite obvious that it all has clear, like, Marxist underpinnings, you could say, in the sense that it's just a racial kind of like racist Marxism almost that's being pushed here,
It,
and it's all
it's a
about equity.
cartoonish form of serious academic work.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's what
it's
it is.
very
And I think
cartoonish.
even it's like even critical race theory. There's Um, it seemed like the Angelos and Candies of the world, they it's vulgar nonsense in my
Yeah,
opinion, right?
you cannot compare someone like Derek Bell to Abraham Kendi.
No, and
Yeah,
it's
yeah. I will say this publicly. In the past, black academics on the left were smarter. So someone like Derek Bell or Martin Kilson, Nathan Eyre, you can't compare those people to Abraham Kendi, Elijah Anderson. No,
No, certainly not. And but that's sort of like the prevailing form it's taking now. So that's what we're seeing, and that's what's being acted out, like in academia, on the streets, even with I just wrote this piece about rioting, which I sent you.
yeah,
Like
I read it.
it's in the streets, it's everywhere. It's in the media. And but you could say, like, I mean, critical race theory is not a new thing. It's
No,
it's it's been
it has been
around for
around for several years. It became quite popular in the 90s, but we ignored it
yes.
back then. But it
No, it
has
was
been
it
around.
was still. I don't know what the turning point was, where suddenly all of that just left the ivory tower of academia, and suddenly like happened to be everywhere. I think it must have been in the last um, 6 or 8 years that started. But like as an academic, as I said earlier, I've been exposed to these ideas for over 20 years now, and when I first heard about you know critical whiteness or whiteness as a concept, I thought, well, it's an interesting way of looking at things. It's not, they're not making, or it seemed to me that they're not claiming, universal, correctness, if you will, for their views. It's just a theory, right? But that point has been, you know, reached a long time ago, and now what we're seeing is, it's not. No, these are not theories. These are, the truths a virtuous person lives by.
Yeah, but Gerfried, so because
Yeah,
we were discussing the BLM, then we segue into postmodernism. But I want to get back to BLM.
I apologize.
George
Yeah.
Floyd. No, you don't need to apologize. It's okay. But George Floyd was a career criminal. He died. It's unfortunate, and America has rewarded his family with wealth and prestige. George Floyd, as I stated just a few seconds ago, he died. It's unfortunate. We can always debate the appropriateness of the knee hold, but George Floyd should never become a saint. I have a problem with the canonization of George Floyd.
It's very strange that that is happening. It's obvious why it's happening, because every religious movement needs, their mythical figures, their saints, and so forth. But George Floyd, of course, is a very bad contender for that position, because um, by any measure, you could not say that he wasn't, just a decent guy who just happened to be
He was
at the wrong
intoxicated.
place.
He went to a store and someone called
Yeah,
the
like
police.
he wasn't just at the wrong place at the wrong time. There's a chain of events that led him to be in that position, and so forth. Um, Obviously, what we're seeing on the tape that was made was not good policing. I would
No,
say that
no.
that was completely unnecessary, and I'm really curious as to the result of the court case. Um, what's going to happen there? Because obviously, certain groups have already said that they were going to riot should it not go as they would like to see it to go.
As I said, knee holds were not banned then, so we can always debate the appropriateness of the knee hold. So Derek Chauvin, I believe, may be charged with manslaughter, but murder, that's a different story. If he were
Yes.
charged for murder, that would
Uh-huh.
be a very controversial judgment.
by definition, it wasn't murder, right? I mean, there was no, like, because murder, like, there's an intent to kill, right? That's supposed to be there, right? I don't think that was there. And I mentioned in my piece on BLM that, you know, we had a similar case, on some level similar case, in Austria in 1999, which may be one of the reasons the whole thing resonated with people here. Marcus Omofuma was killed as he was being deported. He was an asylum seeker. He didn't fulfill the requirements for asylum. To get asylum, he was from Nigeria and he was being deported. And as far as I know, what happened was, like, on the plane back to Africa, he would you know, just scream and like act and, you know, sort of like be violent, or, you know, just you know, so they tied him to a seat, and they and the mistake the officers made was they taped his mouth shut, right? Forcing him to breathe through the nose. And what they didn't know was that he had some preconditions that made it difficult for him to breathe through the nose, and he suffocated. And they were charged with manslaughter, so with involuntary manslaughter. They didn't get. I don't think they even had any prison time that they had to do. I think it was just they were just discharged, and that was the end of it, right? But of course, it was a very iconic case, and I think in the context of BLM today, I think that people were reminded of that, and so there's a connection that I explore in the piece there. But it's, you know, as I said, it's here, it's everywhere. Like, BLM is just, you know, you are pro BLM if you like, in polite society, that's your stance. You're pro Black Lives Matter.
BLM is not going away anytime soon, and its adherents are not interested in logic. So that's a big problem.
No, they don't seem to be. They don't seem to be. And I always, my hope, I mean, ever the optimist, my hope is, you know, I was very similar when I was young, right? So, but I managed to reason myself out of it, right? So I guess there must be at least a certain portion of people who are now, like, carrying those banners and calling for the police to be defunded, who, like, you know, in time will realize that none of that really makes sense, and it's based on you know, not much at all.
Yeah. But since we're coming to the end, Gerfried, earlier in the discussion we said that conservatives pander to blacks and employed blacks who would serve the purpose of being an echo chamber. So we were discussing that issue, and there is someone who is black. I think she's popular and entertaining, but to what extent can we really hold her as a serious person? We're coming to the end. That's why I'm bringing up this conversation. But what are your thoughts on Candice Owens?
Oh, I quite liked her at first, and then I've heard her say a number of things where I'm like, you know, even if you believe that, there's better ways of expressing it. And so she I think so. I started to find her a little off-putting. There's you know, some people have claimed that you know, her good looks are probably maybe part of the reason why she's being taken seriously.
Because, you know, Coleman uses an interesting guy. He's serious, but Miss Owens, she's pretty, but after a while, it can become a bit infantile.
No, see, that's the thing. I think for a lot of black folks in the States, she serves an important purpose. Her whole, like, you know, like, finally leaving the plantation kind of rhetoric, that's Blexit, and, you know, all these catchphrases that she came up with, or that she
Blexit, yes.
Yeah, the Blexit, like, from the Democratic Party, like from the left to the right, and so on. You know, there's I would say there's definitely a certain entertainment value that she brings to the table, but also she's I don't find her very interesting.
But
That's all
yeah,
I can say
and this
there.
is why I don't take conservative seriously. I think it's just a gravy train for entertainers.
Yeah, I mean, but that's also the zeitgeist right now. It's just, as you say, clickbait. All of
Yeah,
these
yeah, yeah,
videos
yeah. So
are so important. I mean, just I think it's less so now, but for the last couple of years, like almost every video that featured a debate between like the left and right, it's always like someone destroying someone else,
yeah,
right?
because no, we're not having those videos because of COVID.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, it's because of COVID.
Yeah, I mean, because those there's no face-to-face interactions anymore. That's possible. That might be an explanation. But it's all. My point is, it's all about clickbait, and it's all
Yeah.
about the like pandering, but also it's just the media that are being used for it, and social media especially. That it's in a sense structural, because the structures that are being used here don't necessarily allow for for more
Yeah.
nuanced
It's
kind of like
controlled
debate.
opposition. I believe leftists like conservatives because they're not very serious. So it's controlled
Yeah.
opposition. The people who are serious, like Paul Gottfried, are
Hmm.
displayed somewhere else. So the unserious will become more popular because their ideas are easier to refute and they're not
Yeah, I mean,
grifty.
that's yeah.
It's controlled opposition and it's good business.
No, of course. I mean, this is you just need to look at the numbers, right? Like how popular some of those podcasts are, and all that, and people making a living. And I mean, fair enough, good for them. they
Yeah,
found
good,
they
good,
found
good for
a,
them.
they found a market, and they're pandering to that market. Sometimes it's like I think the pressure to always to keep providing content.
Yes.
I don't envy them for that at all, right? Like that's kind of that kind of pressure. But fair enough. They do what they're good at, and if debating is your strength, or if sort of like ranting is.
Gerfried, I like it when people make money. I'm all for capitalism. I like it when people make money.
Yes.
So I'm really happy, but at the same time, we need serious conversation. So if you're a clickbait person, let it be known that you're clickbait. It's
Yes. Yes.
always very distressing when I discover someone, I listen to him or for a few days or few months, and then I say, "Oh my God, he's just clickbait." It can be a bit distressing.
Yes. Yes. And very often that's that then just makes it uninteresting.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate, because these people very often, they're very smart, and they kind of fall into that trap almost. But you know uh, who am I to judge? It's
So girlfriend, are you
Mhm.
married? Do you have children?
No, no. I live with my girlfriend and a dog.
Oh,
So
okay. I asked because you mentioned relationships, but before we go, girlfriend, there's something I want to
yeah.
mention that's not related to this conversation. But are you familiar with alternative hypothesis? Alt-hype?
Alternative hypothesis.
A hypothesis, yes.
No, no, can't
Maybe
say
yes.
yeah.
Yeah. Maybe yes. It's a blog. It was written by this guy called Ryan Falk.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but he had a YouTube channel. The YouTube channel was popular, very popular. But he isn't popular, Ryan. But his ideas are pretty interesting, and he shows that the alt-right conservatives, etc., are not particularly serious because he has
Okay.
done more than other people to marshal data in favor of what they call race realism. But beyond a small percentage of bloggers, he's not popular or famous or anything like that.
Okay.
So there doesn't seem to be much demand for rigorous work.
Yeah, I mean the seriousness. I mean, these are serious issues, right?
Yeah.
That we're discussing here. So to turn them into a form of show business, it's I guess it's not really helping the debate along. It's not really solving any of the issues. But then again, as long as there's other voices too, as long as there's people out there who are not afraid to say the unpopular, or who not who don't depend. I think
Yeah.
who are more independent, in their thinking. um I guess as long as you can have both, it's good, because
Yeah.
one can lead to the other. As I said earlier with the IDW, even though someone like Ben Shapiro, for instance, um, I mean, it's entertainment, right?
Yeah, Ben
It's
Shapiro is a smart guy on paper, but when you listen to him, you have to say, "Oh my God, he can do way better if he's actually as smart as people say."
Yeah, no, I think he's very smart, but like the way he presents himself, or the way he presents the issues that he's concerned about, it's very I find it entertaining. It's entertainment. It's structured in a way that's meant to be entertaining. It's like jokes and short clips, and he talks very fast and all these kinds of things. Um, but it can lead, the thing always is okay, maybe that is sort of like the threshold that it makes it's easy access, for people, and then maybe they find out about other um authors like Gottfried, or
Yes.
people like that. So I'm trying to be optimistic in these
But
in
girlfriend,
these
if there's a
areas.
problem, if there is a problem, girlfriend, we can solve it. That's why I'm interviewing you.
Hmm.
Yeah, so instead of saying, "Oh my God, I can't deal, these people are unserious," do a random channel every now and then.
Yeah, no, I think that's great, and as I said, I really enjoyed I have really enjoyed your writing, and I'm really glad to see that you took up this format as well. So and I, I listened to some of the things you
Yeah.
put out, and
Yeah.
it's
So it,
it's
it, it was
really it's
good.
a good.
It was really good having you, girlfriend, and you will be back sometime in the future.
Yes, that would be great.
Yeah.
I'd enjoy that very much.
Okay, so it was a pleasure having you, and I will invite you again. Bye.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Okay, take care.
Yeah, you too.